And it is recording.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 4th Digital Transformation in Government Conference. Right now, we're very fortunate to have the presentation by Dr. Guy-Vincent Jourdan, Dr. Iosif-Viorel Onut, and Brad Stocking. And they're going to be talking about the contested cyberspace, employing cyber ranges for collective security and resiliency. Dr. Jourdan is a full professor of computer science at the School of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, which he joined in 2004 after 7 years in the private sector as Chief Technology Officer and then CEO of Ottawa-based Decision Academic Graphics. He's currently co-director of the University of Ottawa IBM Cyber Range and the director of the micro program in cybersecurity. He received his PhD from l'Université de Rennes in France in 1995. For the past decade, his main research topic has been cybersecurity, specifically cybercrime detection and prevention. He's published over 100 scientific papers and co-authored 18 patents. Dr. Viorel Onut is passionate about curriculum and product innovation acceleration through R&D. In the past decade, he's managed more than 150 research projects involving 35 universities, led by over 90 professors, over 360 students, and over 330 IBM staff. That's pretty good. Yeah. He specializes in cybersecurity and cybercrime. He's been in the space for about 20 plus years in various technical, academic, and management roles. Currently, he's co-director of the University of Ottawa and IBM Cyber Range, adjunct professor at the University of Ottawa, senior manager, R&D strategy at IBM Canada Lab, and IBM master inventor at the IBM Security. He completed his PhD degree in computer science at the University of New Brunswick and specializes in topics related to application and network security. In recent years, he turned his attention to analyzing phishing and scam attacks. The third presenter is Brad Stocking. He's a security practitioner with over 22 years experience in security program development and security engineering, testing, and operations. Brad served in the Canadian Armed Forces for 17 years, largely in security engineering roles, and then as a principal security architect for the Bank of Canada and then Payments Canada. He brings deep experience to security architecture, threat modeling, application security, and cloud security projects. So without further ado, I will turn you over to the capable hands of these three gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Try to avoid the background noise. Afternoon, everyone. So like he mentioned, Brad Stocking. I was one of the dumb people in the walls of D&D, as the gentleman at the top mentioned. So these are our pretty faces. So you can see our beautiful portraits there. But as was explained, I've been in the vendor side for about 2 years now. Prior to that, I worked at Bank of Canada, Payments Canada, and the Forces. And my time in the Forces, I deployed a secret level cyber range to support collective training with our cyber defensive units in collaboration with our schools down in Kingston and across the country to ensure that we can drive collective cybersecurity objectives, right? So that's going to be a core to this talk is, there's a lot of cyber range, deployments out in private sector, public sector, and they mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. Some of them are very individually focused, where they provide, capture the flag, background, individual puzzle solving or challenges on crypto, you name it. But what I want to discuss today is how do we elevate it beyond that individual training and look at how we develop collective training, and especially across interorganizational cyber response, right, and resiliency. Because if we train one individual, if you train a small team, that's useful. But more and more, we're seeing that you can't just have one organization fighting the fight. It's a shared experience. When we look in different sectors, say the banking industry for sure, and if you Google it right now, there's some serious threats to the banking industry from Russian state-sponsored attacks. the banks have to come together, right? When we look at Bill C-26 from the federal government, looking at the cyber resiliency for critical infrastructure to Canada, this is one of the most important legislation I could think of out there. One thing that I've noticed coming from D&D, working in the private sector, is there wasn't a good grip on requirements, training, and overall cyber defense for our very sensitive critical infrastructure. And I'm hoping this bill changes that. But we'll touch on a couple of these concepts. Things are bad out there. That's the sum of this slide, right? When we look at COVID and what happened with the acceleration into e-commerce for a lot of small and medium businesses, and then just look at the data for cyber insurance companies, ramping into COVID, the cyber insurance companies lost their shirts. And why did they? Because there was a lot of small and medium businesses who signed up for cyber insurance, who ramped up into e-commerce, deployed in the cloud with very little understanding of the threats that they faced. And then that exacerbated the very limited skilled security resources that we have to defend those same networks, right? So when I deal with clients, when I'm looking back at D&D even, they're struggling to find a way to train analysts individually, let alone collectively. Because again, these problems that they face, say a major ransomware outbreak, it's not going to be one analyst that saves the day. It's going to be a full team effort. It's going to be from the leadership right down to the tactical analyst. So how do we train for that? How do we make sure that, one, we train in preparation for a ransomware, outbreak, or, any other such threat that they might face? So I want to start with a simple definition of what a range is. And this is a bugbear of mine. I get a little worked up about it because to me, a range in the military really is where you train munitions, and it used to be in kinetic warfare and now in cyber warfare. That term has been latched on by the industry to mean everything sort of cyber training. You can't beat them, join them. I won't fight the matter, but truthfully, a cyber range, especially when you look at US Cyber Command and the major ranges they've developed, they're to train exploits that the government and the military use against adversaries, right? And to launch munitions against defensive networks. What they've evolved to, though, is more about a training environment, right? Where you can bring people in, you can try pretty risky tactics and have them learn from those sort of techniques, learn how to defend, detect, do all the good stuff they need them to do. The motto, train as you fight, is something you'll hear throughout, and that's very much an Army term, a military term, that some of the cyber ranges that we see in, different conferences, capture the flag events, all that, they're great. They drive, critical thought, they drive, crypto problems, like I said, reverse engineering and malware, but they don't teach they often don't emulate the environment that the analysts are going to be working in, and they don't have the same tool sets the analyst is going to work on day to day. And I'll get to why that can be a pro or a con. I just want to throw up 4 typical use cases and things that I've deployed in that cyber range I developed for D&D. So first and foremost, the range is often meant for cyber operations team training, right? And what does that mean? Well, again, I have a slide later on where we go into a concept of operations for a typical security operations team. This means that you have the different roles on your cyber operations team, and you exercise from end to end across those roles to see how they collaborate, how they exchange data, how they, provide or contribute to the fight, right, of defending the network. The second use case can be a lot of things. This can be back to that munitions development. If you're a company that's developing, ways to test software looking for zero-day attacks, a cyber range is a good place as a sandbox to test against different technologies. It's also a good place to test defense in depth. And a lot of organizations, especially small and medium businesses, but a lot of large organizations, when they deliver capabilities into their organization, it's one at a time. They'll have a new endpoint protection platform that's being deployed. They'll have a new, network detection platform that's being deployed. It gets tested throughout that process, deployed in the network, but the sum of all the parts, all those different defensive capabilities are rarely tested together. And most often you're not going to test that in production. So the only place they have all those capabilities and all that technology is in production, where you're not going to risk taking down operations to test them. So a lot of times they never truly test the defense in depth of their own capabilities. So Cyber Range is a great place to train and test that. Interorganizational testing and collective training. So collective training, I use that term, that's a military term. We build from individual basis right up into the collective, where you have massive exercises. I was fortunate enough to be involved in an exercise called Cyber Flag, led by NSA and US Cyber Command, where they brought together the Five Eyes community. Each team brought various capabilities. Canada had a modest team. New Zealand had a more modest team. US obviously had a huge team. But in that exercise, Carnegie Mellon had developed a range that had about 4,000 nodes. And it had full BGP routing, it had autonomous systems, had all the good stuff you'd see in the internet. It had enclaves, it had different nations and different workloads. A very, very robust environment, very cool. And then we had a blue team, a team that protected our enclave, our network. And we had teams doing red teaming activity. Extreme. It was about a 14-day exercise. It was amazing. And the whole idea there was to drive how the leadership, so the generals, colonels, the head shed would react to tactical events happening on the ground within the cyber range. And it was meant to drive that whole organization to see how the processes worked, how the different teams worked together, how they shared data, how they'd find implants. This is a very important thing going forward. The more we do in silos, the less we're going to have these lessons learned, the less we're going to build out intelligence sharing between organizations. When I worked at Payments Canada, one of my big frustrations of the industry, so working with the financial institutions, is they held a lot of their cards close to their chest. They weren't sharing the data, and they did it for competitive advantage. They did it for communications and risk to their brand. But if we look at what the potential risk is to the Canadian financial sector, that can't happen, right? And this is where we want to drive industry to collaborate and share meaningfully. And then offensive technique research and execution. This is back to that more that munitions-based area, where researching different ways we can test our kit, developing new ways that you can then take into production to do very focused tests without disrupting operations. So you can be more disruptive in the range, test some things, refine the test down to something that won't blow up your operational network, and then you can go deploy that as you go on. This is a sample concept of operations, just conceptual. What it builds out, and it maps the NIST cybersecurity framework and the core functions out of that. I use this to drive simple conversation with clients often. I use this at Payments Canada. I use this everywhere I go, and it adapts, right? There's different breakouts. But what's important about this is before you go into a range and before you start training, you need to understand how you intend to operate, right? And who's doing what to whom, where are the roles and responsibilities, and what are those interfaces and what kind of data is exchanged. I'm going to tell you, it's kind of scary how many organizations have truthfully not thought to even this level, right? They put a bunch of bodies in a room, say, here's your kit, go. And they haven't thought through, I have vendor X, vendor Y, I have partners in the supply chain, I have SaaS that I've deployed in, I have interagency work. They don't map out these interfaces. This is a core concept. If you're going to accomplish collective training, do the concept of operations and think through it. I won't spend much time on this because it's that whole debate on what cyber resiliency is, cybersecurity. I have several thoughts on this. This old paradigm of cybersecurity where they say that you don't assume breach, that it's more static controls, it's preventative and not reactive. The way I've done cybersecurity forever and a day was more on that cyber resiliency side, threat-driven, thinking, assuming a breach, that you're not thinking you won't be breached, knowing that you will be. It's just a matter of when and how. And so this paradigm is somewhat important because this is where we have to, I don't want to just rename things and move to a new, title, cyber resiliency. But to me, the core difference is security will look at defending against malicious threats, and the resiliency is looking at how you rebound from that and how you recover. And that's really the salient point for me. The other points are interesting, but it is a key differentiator because in the cyber resiliency, you bring in a lot more of the business operations, the continuity of operations. They own that space a lot more, and they are concerned with their uptime and how resilient their network is. So bringing in my mind, the two together is very important, but understanding the differences is also important. So when we're looking at a cyber range, that's an important thing to think through of how do you test your security capabilities and your different, your people, process, and technology to deliver on resiliency, to ensure that they can detect things, but they're trained to react and respond and get the network back and up and running after a successful cyber attack. So I'm going to go into these points in the next following slide, but there's some challenges with cyber ranges typically. The cost of implementation and maintenance. This is not trivial. And a lot of people overlook this and they go, we're going to build this in our organization. They set aside a bucket of money and then that money quickly runs out because it's a lot. It's not, like I said, it's not trivial. It's not for the faint of heart. And they underestimate, buying the kit is one thing, building it once and having images built and tools deployed, that's another thing, but there's follow-on maintenance. Realistic simulation, stimulation. Training value quickly goes down when the analysts, it's rather easy to detect what is human-driven, what is machine-driven, and there's not realistic traffic or activity generated in the environment. And I'll get into that in the next slides. The motivation of the primary trading audience, that's always tricky, right? In a real-world scenario, there's enough drive from the leadership, there's enough urgency that they're motivated, they will react. But what we find in military training often is when you repeat the same scenarios, you go to the same training area, and that lives aren't really on the line, the training value diminishes over time because it starts becoming routine, they start switching their mind off. So that's something that has to be thought through. And then the strategic and tactical combined training. That one that I mentioned, that major exercise with the US Cyber Command, really cool. That was humongous and a lot of money. Most organizations have to limit it to certain areas, whether they do at the strategic level, they look at how, when an incident happens, how the executives come together to form a crisis management team, react, involve legal communications, all those different parts. That's important. Then at the tactical layer, you also want to see how the on-the-ground analysts are reacting as well and see how their training is paid off and if they can do the job they're intending to do. Combining them is super tricky, right? Because to drive enough activity down here to challenge or give inputs to that strategic level, it's often so much coordination that one side suffers, one or the other side suffers. I've seen so many where the tactical has a little bit of work to do. It generates a whole spin on the executive, and then the tactical team's bored to death. So to get into the maintenance, and I think we're okay for time so far. I'll get through these rather quickly. But this is just a list of some of the things that you'll run into for maintenance, right? Just the overall infrastructure themselves. There's a lot of things. The workload and image maintenance, most people go, yep, we can put a bunch of servers in place, that's great. Then you get into networking, and how realistic is that, right? If it's too simplistic of a local area network without, advanced routing protocols, without some of the things you'd see in an advanced network, again, if you're doing network traffic analysis, that becomes less and less important. Now, there's ways that you can get around that, right? There's a lot of ranges where what they do is they go to an enterprise network, say they'll go to the Ottawa U network, they'll do a massive traffic capture, and then they'll replay that or use that to analyze. And that's great for individual training or training on, a large data set and see how you can do network traffic analysis. But if you want to remain dynamic and in a responsive scenario, that playback doesn't support it well. And then you get into the enterprise services, and this is where I find most things fall apart, right? they'll deploy an email server, but it'll be, some open source email server that no organization uses, right? It's not Outlook, for instance. It's not, they won't deploy Oracle. They'll deploy Postgres. They'll deploy something else that's not typical in the enterprise, right? So this is a difficult thing. And then the security capabilities, again, depending on your training objective, if you deploy open source, use security onion, certain capabilities, it's great for training value, but that train as we fight, if you want your analysts to learn on the tools that you have deployed in your enterprise, that has that has limits, because when they use security onion in some of the open source, there might be less capabilities, there might be more. When they go back to the enterprise tool, that could be a totally different set of capabilities and limitations that they haven't trained for. So you want to be careful with that. And then the training services, this to me, again, a lot of ranges are squandered by just having the kit and going, here, folks, go at it, right? Without tracking how they're actually learning, without having anyone watch how they react to certain scenarios and record it and look how the different analysts actually respond. This is probably the most important point of a range to drive training. If you don't have this instrumented, you don't have these concepts in place, you often, a lot of these exercises in the cyber range are wasted. They're wasted effort because you don't truly learn your operations. The realistic training environment, I've seen this so many times where, again, they'll play some traffic, they'll have a dumb user on a workstation clicking on any link that comes their way, right? And if you have like 10 workstations in your environment and one user clicking on things, any savvy analyst can pick that up right away. And I've seen it with, I did several exercises with the military colleges in the States and the Royal Military College Canada here in Canada. And at West Point, they would deploy these dumb users within each of the colleges and have them click on links, and the different military colleges had to defend the network against the NSA, the big bad NSA. West Point, what they did is because they had so many officer cadets, they just put an officer cadet behind the user at the computer. Don't click that, don't click that. So quickly loses its training value when things are gamed too much and it's not realistic, right? So this is something we want to avoid. Content, just the documents you see on the workstation, what the inbox looks like, all these different things, they matter because as an analyst is digging through, if it's not realistic comment, they quickly, brush it off. And the user and system activity, this is pretty key. How to generate user-like activity, especially since more and more organizations are doing their work on client-side exploitation and tracking through endpoint detection response capabilities, things like CrowdStrike, using those sorts of tools. More and more is done on the endpoint for threat hunting and all those fun buzzwords. So in order to drive that training, you want to see realistic en masse user activity. Motivation and analyst bias. I could go on for days about this. And depending on the size of your security operations center, the analyst bias, and I'll jump to that right away because that always interests me. And we deal with that on IBM in our security operations centers, right? You have a series of junior analysts who are hired out of school and they're doing security monitoring. You have seniors who monitor them and manage. It's always a fight to get the analysts so they don't go to the problems they understand and solve those problems, right? Especially when it's queue-based or quota-based, right? If they have a quota where they have to close off, 15 tickets a day, they'll go, great, I know this one, check it off, and then they might be missing some of the bigger threats, right? Similar in the training environment, that has to be thought through. We want to break that bias up. We want to expose them to that bias. We want to get them thinking critically as an analyst on multiple problem sets and different techniques. I mentioned the consequence already. If they don't have enough to make it real and there isn't real world consequence, they slowly lose motivation. And I won't, with the academic institutions and the profs here, you can talk for days and days on learning styles and how different students learn. That's the same for a range, right? Like some folks are really good at those capture the flag exercises and they love them and they get addicted and they work and they build up skill sets. Some people it doesn't resonate with, it doesn't connect. So when you're building a range and you're thinking through that, we have to drive some of those think through those learning styles, think how each trainee and each group is best motivated in how they learn and go from there. And then gamification, it's a great way to motivate because people love points. They love to get a scoreboard. They like to, compete. Again, it drives wonky behavior. That officer cadet in West Point, they were trying to win rather than learn, right? I fought my profs at RMC because they wanted to win as well. And I was trying to move analysts around within different parts of the team so they'd learn new skills. And the profs were like, no, we got to win, right? And I got it. Like, it's a competition. Little Canada want to compete against the big bad US military colleges, but you quickly lose training value when it comes to that. And the last bit I want to talk to is strategic versus tactical. I touched on it just a bit before, but it's not a trivial problem. And the team and I have been discussing this and what we want to drive, right? In the Ottawa Youth Cyber Range. For sure, we want to build up awareness at the strategic level, right? The more and more executives that are aware of the real world cyber threats and how they react to things like ransomware, how they engage their teams, how they understand that these threats are not chicken little, the sky is falling, the better, right? We need them engaged. And we need to be led from the top. There's a risk there because I've been in organizations where all of a sudden you have armchair generals from the top driving right down to the bottom, right? So one of the key training lessons here is to teach the strategic level and the tactical level that in order to win the cyber fight, you have to push as much delegation and authority down to the lowest level so they can react in time, right? So that's a key when I stress this strategic versus tactical, that's a key lesson that I drive. I want them to work at it, show what happens when every decision gets pushed from the top down and how that slows the operational and tactical team down to a halt and they lose the fight, right? So these sort of organizational lessons, these are things you want to think through if you're doing this exercise and really push to drive that point. But that means that you've thought through your concept of operations I showed earlier. That means that you have thought through how the organization is structured to respond to these threats, period. Like I said, and I'll wrap up here to pass off to my colleagues, but I've seen some major cyber exercises without the proper resourcing take a run at that end-to-end strategic tactical, and it's often a flop. And it is because they don't have enough resources and it's really hard to drive that end to end. But it doesn't mean it's not something we should strive for. It's just we have to think through the best way to stimulate the two groups. And that's all I have, folks.
Thank you, Brad. Just want to pick it up from there and talk a little bit more about the strategic level. When we talk about the tactical team and the strategic team, we often look at how organization responds from all these aspects, right? Brad was talking about the tactical team and how they need to talk with the C-level executives and different people in the organization. And this is something that every organization needs to know, and they need to have they need to understand what is an incident type. When do you have a crisis? What are the definitions of different things? If they don't, then when the cyber attack happens, because it will happen, they will not know when to engage the executive level, when to escalate something, when something is business as usual. Not only in that, but there has to be an incident response plan that people need to know. And when you talk about organization, you have legal, you have HR, you have communications, you have line of business, you have, in addition to the tactical teams. And all of those guys, they need to know what their roles are and what they need to do in the case of crisis or a cyber attack. Are they aware of their role? Things like if there is a plan are those people actually still hired with that company? It happens that, a cyber incident comes around and, you go through the pan, and here is a person that is no longer with the company. You don't have time to investigate and who's the replacement and all that in those kind of situations. Back to Brad's point, the tactical team is waiting for some sort of input, and so in order to be able to be as efficient as possible, these things need to be trained and need to be rehearsed so that when it happens, everybody knows what that is. Communication strategies, what if the email server goes down? How are those guys going to communicate? Do they have alternate ways of communication? Is there a satellite phone in place, or something else that they can use in order to communicate and come to conclusions? So these are some of the questions that we are also asking in the context of a cyber range. At the university is great because we have different departments that specialize in different things. Like we have communications, we have departments that train lawyers, the department that train. All of those individuals, they need to be aware of their role in the case of a crisis, and in the case of the security attack. The way that, do you have prepared statements, right? The way that you respond to media, it will influence the stock price on the of your company, or it will influence the way that the public perceives your company. All of those things are super important, that you don't just poof them up. I think that we should do this. No. That statement is there for forever and has been reviewed by legal and the teams and all that, and exactly what to. There are cases when people are very they are very responsive of helping others, right? So if someone calls someone and start asking questions, and reporters are very good at asking questions and grabbing every piece of information out of you, if they talk with someone that is very helpful, they can build up and they can cook up their own story. All of those things, they need to be thought of, and also, our employees and students, they need to be aware of their role in those kind of situations, right? So we want to test, the completeness of the response. And how these individual teams are interacting. Back to the point earlier about the top down on bottom up approach of the who's going to do what. There is something that we call leader's intent, and that is what are the leaders empowering the lower tactical teams to do without bothering them, because they don't have time. They need to react fast. Is what I'm doing in line with what the leader intent is? If the answer is yes, then I can proceed. I don't need to go to that person and ask for super permission. And time is of essence, right? So in the case of a cyber range, we want to exert, to put a little bit of pressure. Guy is going to go over some of the elements of the cyber range that we have, but we also do interviews. We make people sweat, because in a case of a cyber attack, they will. There were incidents when someone in the audience, they had that beeper for checking the heart rate, right? And it started beeping. And that's the experience that you want to have, because you are going to be under pressure on those kind of circumstances. Last point, and then I'm going to give it back to Guy. In the case of a business response challenge, we have what is called a fusion team, right? I was talking about, HR, finance, security, all these, compliance, all these groups, they come together and they start, solving the problem. And yes, there is a non-technical side to the cyber range as well as a technical part. So we try to cover it all, as well as on the training aspect for companies as well as students on what are their exact roles when it comes to a cyber attack. I think that's everything that I wanted to say in addition to what Brad said, and then I want to pass it to Guy.
Merci. Bonjour tout le monde. I am Guy-Vincent Jourdan. I am a professor here at the University of Ottawa in engineering, computer science. And I am also the co-director of the cyber range that we are going to describe here. What I want to present to you today is more what the university is doing in terms of cybersecurity. We have identified that as a priority. From the top down, the president, the VP research, the entire direction of the university, and then the faculty of engineering and so other faculties are quite invested in moving that agenda forward. So what does it mean precisely? What it is we do there? So we have created this thing we call the Cyber Hub, or the Cyber Carrefour in French. And that's where it's an umbrella, and everything related to cyber belongs to the Cyber Carrefour. Now, in particular, the reason I put this slide up is to show you the type of faculties that are involved currently today in cybersecurity. Of course, there is engineering, and of course, there is science. You expect that. But the important point is that we have the faculty of law here. Actually, both, we have two, and they are both involved in the Cyber Hub. We have social science, we have medicine, we have the School of Management, public welfare involved in this initiative. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone at the Faculty of Social Science is interested in cybersecurity, but there are some profs that are interested in cybersecurity in the context of their teaching, the context of their research. And so they belong to the Cyber Hub, and we work together. So it's important for us. It's really a multidisciplinary approach that we are following. It seems to be quite successful so far. The particular aspect, so in the Cyber Hub, I belong to engineering, and in engineering, we are heading the biggest investment so far in the context of the Cyber Hub, which is the cyber range. We have signed an agreement with IBM a couple of years ago to build a cyber range in the STEM building, so a bit down the road here. We are building this cyber range, and this is a facility. It has an actual cyber range. This is a picture, not of our cyber range, but of a very similar one. It has, so it will have this room here, about 30 seats. 30 people can get trained at any given time in the cyber range. It has a data center. It has a separated network from the university. I think that's unique on campus. So the connection to the cyber hub, to the cyber range, sorry, is completely segregated from the rest of the university. So what it is we do here is not impacting anyone on campus. We have a media room. We have an observation room. So there is another room which is just as large as this one, with cameras looking into the cyber range, so people can see how people are reacting, can discuss, can watch their colleagues or their own team, if those are people from industry coming there or from government. So it has a lot of capacity. And one thing that is also quite interesting is, so the university as such is a big enterprise. We have like 50,000 people walking around the campus. It's actually, as far as enterprise go, it's probably a pretty risky one. Everyone walking around doing what they want. There is no particular, there is an attempt at controlling what they are doing, but it's not very successful. So the network has to be monitored, to be secured. There is a SOC at the university, people working there, and so the SOC is also going to move at the same location. So we will have the training and we'll have the actual security team working hand in hand. So I'm very happy about that. We have established connection with them already. We're working together on research project, and they will come and teach in the cyber range to our students, as well as to anyone who is coming to receive some training there. So that's our initiative. I just want to brag a little bit to say that actually the cyber range we are talking about, that's this IBM type cyber range. It's one of 3 in the world. It's not a common thing that you find every other city. There are only 3 in the world. There is the original one in Cambridge, in the US. There is this one in Bangalore, in India, and there is our cyber range in Ottawa, and that's it. And of those 3, there is only one that is not pure IBM for IBM, only by IBM. It's ours. So this is a university-led cyber range, but it's going to be used part-time by IBM for their own business. So it's the same type of solution that they have elsewhere. And some days it's going to be closed for IBM for their business. And the rest of the time, we have it for our training, for our research, and we'll use it for that. So just in a few words, what it is we want to do with this thing. It's a fairly massive investment as far as the university is concerned. It's pretty expensive stuff, not the kind of things we do usually. So what are we trying to do here? Well, we want to impact our activities with this cyber range inside the cyber hub along 3 axes. We are going to use it for training our own students, training anyone who is interested in getting trained. So we will develop a lot more micro-credentials, online courses, on-site courses that you can take that even though you are not registered otherwise in one of our usual programs, bachelor or master or anything like that. And of course, we are going to do a lot of tailored training where we develop course material, teaching based on the requirement of a partner. So we find someone, so here we are talking about government. We are hoping to find a lot of partnership with government to develop some of the training that is being needed. And we will invest in tailoring the course material based on what the needs are. So we want to do, we want to use our facilities for training. We want to use it for research as well. We are a research institute, and most of my colleagues are there for research. And we think that having access to this realistic, fantastic environment is going to help test some of the ideas that we have. It's going to really up the game in terms of what we can do. We will have access to much better, much more expensive type of devices, hardware. We will have access to we will be able to basically test at a scale that we can't do right now with what we do. So we believe that the type of research that is going to come out of the University of Ottawa moving forward is going to have a lot more impact than it did before. And it was already pretty good, but we want to increase that. And of course, we have this cool, I mean, I'm hoping that next year for this conference, it will be ready and we'll be able to host you for an afternoon of fun there. And you will see that this is very impressive. It's really nice, very shiny. It's in the nice new building STEM. And so we want to use that also for community building, for outreach. We want to bring in the kids. We want to bring in everyone who is interested and try to get them engaged, try to make them think about security and try to have fun. And that's also a way, you're probably aware that in this space, in security, in safety, there is a huge gap in the needs versus what we have. So there are just not enough people who are interested in working that field. So this is for us a way to try to drive more interest in the field. Okay, so what it is we actually do, I just want to talk a little bit in terms of research to give you an idea of what we already cover. So these are just some names, some people. So we do AI and cybersecurity. We do lower level. Almost everyone here is doing AI, by the way, but this one, it would be at the lower level, Internet of Things, type of firmware, analysis. I work more on the cybercrime. We have network here. We have crypto. We have software testing for security. All of that driven by, AI, machine learning in all these cases. So I just want to get a couple of examples just to tell you what we do. So this would be, I just use this press release here, but this is the group I am leading where Vio is working with us. And we have quite a group here working on cybersecurity in general, using AI more and more. Just for example of papers that we have submitted or that we are going to present, all of that is from the last 2 to 3 months, I would say. So there is here a paper that was sent last week. It's about developing model to understand to help understanding automatically log traffic. And if you have been in the space just a little bit, you know that anything that you do generates a lot of noise everywhere. And the difficulty of, one of the difficulties at least, of trying to make sense of what is happening on your network is to sift through all these terabytes of data that you get all the time. And a human is really easily overwhelmed by all of that. So we work on using AI, those new models, to help with this aspect. So that didn't work. Okay, so you don't see that. Can I? Here is. Okay, let me just move. This one here. Yeah, I'm going to do that here. This one is a work that is on obfuscation of code. So when people are launching an attack, they are trying to make their code difficult to understand, and they use different ways of hiding their intent. It's called obfuscation. And here we have developed a model to use the fact that they're hiding their information to recognize their identity. So if you try to hide something, you are trying to use different ways of doing that. And we use the ways that you do things to recognize that the person who did that attack is the same person that the person that did that attack, because you have different ways of hiding your own information. So not only do we unhide what you are doing, but we are analyzing the way you are doing it to try to understand who you are. This one is about federated learning. So when in models, if you want to create a global model without sharing the data too much, you can send your model to each of the participants, and you learn locally, and then globally you are trying to create a global model without sharing your data. So it's a direction that is very important for security, for privacy, of course. And here we are looking at the question of what if some of these players are actually not playing balls and they are sending false updates to the central model, trying to get the global model to misbehave. And the last one that I want to describe here is, well, we are trying now here to find on the blockchain scam payments, and we use also a model for that to try to find this kind of thing. So this is how do I? Well, okay, I'm just going to go this way. We also work in different ways. So, for example, here this is Lionel working. So that's Lionel Briand, his group, working in software testing. In this case, he's working with the University of Luxembourg. So we are in collaboration with them. They work in, so this paper here is trying to predict failure in a system. So they look at pattern and they are trying to detect that the system is going to fail in so many days based on its current behavior and its past behavior. And those are learned also, those are AI-driven models. This is a very interesting paper on trying to test web application for security automatically using what they call metamorphic testing, which means that instead of predicting what the result should be, it's comparing the results from one input to the next. And this way you can scale your type of security much more than, you don't need to basically reinvent your system to test it. And I'm running out of time, so we are also at the university involved in much larger partnership like this one here, which is a very large initiative across Canada. And what's interesting about this particular initiative here is that this is really, if you look at the research themes, we are talking about behavior, we are talking about regulation, we are talking about social. So this is non-technical in nature, and this is still something very important to us. And we have very good colleagues working there. We have partnerships, of course, with IBM, but beyond that, we are working with other companies. So I'm just using Fortinet here as an example. They just gave us an award for our partnership. What we do is, so Fortinet, they sell security devices, firewalls and the likes, and we have integrated their training into our own training. So our students can take our network security course, normal course as part of their degree. And at the end, they get their degree, their credit for the course, but they also get an NSC certification from Fortinet. And Fortinet is actually paying the bill for that. So, because usually you have to pay to write those certifications, and this comes for free for our students. And we are opening that out to everyone in the community. So we should be able to provide this kind of certification and to anyone who is interested. And these are just simple examples. We are really building up here. We are going to have a lot more moving forward. We have a microprogram in cybersecurity also that we have open. Right now, it's more an internal thing for at the grad level, but we are going to open it also once the CyberEng is open. It's going to be available to everyone. So if you are interested in getting a training in cybersecurity, but you don't want to go into a full bachelor or full master's degree, you can take that. You get 3 or 4 courses. You get your micro program. If later on you want to do a master, well, you already have 3 or 4 courses in your pocket. They are going to count. But in the meantime, you already have a certification from the University of Ottawa there. And so, as I said, we are also interested in events to try to do outreach. And we are going to organize more and more the type of event, be it with high school students, with our own student population, trying to go beyond the type of people who are usually already interested in cybersecurity. We want to really reach out to everyone on campus. And we also want to use that to reach out to beyond our student community in Ottawa, in Canada, and in the world. We already have partners who are intending on coming from Monterrey, for example. We have an existing partnership with Tec de Monterrey in Mexico, and so we want to use that to try to get more people to put Ottawa on the map and to become more and more a central player in this field. So that's, I guess, more than all the time I have. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, BPO and Brad. No, that was a great session. Now we have time for just a few questions. Then I have to get the next speakers set up. Okay. Do we have any questions from the virtual world? Anybody there? Oh, yeah, we got 4. Can large cyber range be spun up as a virtual cloud environment?
So absolutely, if you can hear me. I'll just speak louder. Absolutely, you can.
We need to.
I only hear that through this way. So absolutely, the cloud can be used, but with great limitations, right? There's, when you think through, especially some of the research topics that Guy had mentioned, I know that when you look at malware research, reverse engineered malware, hyperscalers typically aren't too keen on having malware within their environment, even if it's in logically segregated, segmented environments. And there's limitations of what kind of, threats you can throw. They're moving to support that going forward for sure, but there are limitations in your flexibility and what you can do for research. The second question, small nations such as Israel, a global leader in cybersecurity. Any thoughts on what they're doing in Canada? Yeah, for sure. I mean, we collaborate with Israel all the time, right? And, from a military point of view, if you look at the offensive security certification, that's, and essentially the lead certification for penetration testing, for sure, we glean what we can from Israel, right? And when you think about it, though, Israel is also supported quite heavily by US Cyber Command. So there's a lot of integration and collaboration there. What word is planning? So yeah, ICS is definitely a core focus of research within IBM and a core focus of security.
That's industrial
control systems and OT environments. Yeah, absolutely. So, and if you look at RMC, they have been digging in, and that's another organization that we're hoping to collaborate with. There's ICS systems on, the frigates, on the different frames. They've been doing research in that environment. IBM's doing a lot supporting our different private sector clients that work within that space and use ICS.
Thanks, Brad. We had a presentation yesterday from Marina Van Kunat. She was with TransAlta, and she was talking about cybersecurity in the energy sector. And a lot of it is addressing industrial control systems and how they manage to put their system, anyways, their overall environment together from a cyber point of view and from a verification point of view. Okay, any questions inside here? Going, everybody needs a coffee. Okay, we got some coffee out there. Why don't you grab a quick coffee and come back in? And then we've got General Retired David Anderson, who's going to talk to you about the C4ISR, the Canadian Armed Forces Digital Campaign Plan. There we go. Yes. Sorry. It's changed names over the years, but basically that's great. Okay, this will be an interesting, and if any departments are looking at creating their own plan, strategic plan, this is one that you can sort of take a look at. It's pretty generic.